Hello everybody and welcome to another video tutorial. Now for today's tutorial I'm going to actually show you guys how I took my 3/4 concept and how I actually turned that into a vehicle rotation. So as you can see, what I first started off with is I started with the 3/4 view that I already had, and I broke that down structurally so that when I started rotating the rest of the vehicle I would have a guide to make things a bit easier. Now, right now I'm drawing out the basic structure for the side view. Generally the side view is more complicated than the front and the back view. The only other view that would be more complicated than either of those would normally be the 3/4 back view. Now in this case I'm not doing a 3/4 back view, I'm just doing the side view, the front and the back view. So I'll have 4 views in total by the end of this painting. Now right now, since I do have a very complicated shape that I'm trying to rotate, I'm starting with very large lines and just working out the basic structure and figuring out the basic elements before I start adding the detail and cleaning up the line work. Once again, these multiple stages help break down the process and to help ensure that the structure makes sense first and foremost, and that the detail elements that I add in later will fit with the overall design. If I were to hand this to a 3D modeler later on, the more accurate I can make these images, the easier time they will have generally to model these in 3D. Now the most complicated perspective is actually this portion here, because it's not facing the viewer straight on. It's actually on an angle according to the original concept. So I start playing around with the proportions a bit to make them more similar, and the portion right next to it has a lot of interesting curves and dips in it, which makes it even more complicated, but also more interesting to work on because of that. So you'll see me fiddling with the structure quite a bit before I end up settling on the design. For that portion actually I end up doing quite a few changes, but when I'm actually doing the cleanup line work. Now the reason why this image is flashing is I'm actually turning it off on a regular basis to check my original 3/4 view and side view that I have underneath. This allows me to once again check the proportions, make sure I have all the detail elements that are already in those drawings, so that when I work on this one everything works together. So the most difficult part actually wasn't the actual hull of the ship, it was actually the engines in the back. Simply because I have a partial cylinder in the back there in which these engines attach to. So right now I'm just cleaning up what I already have, and I will be repeating this process also for the front and back view. This is the part that took the longest though. I believe this took about 6 hours to complete the side view, to make sure that everything was up to par in comparison to the 3/4 view. The front and the back views, they probably took between 2 to 3 hours each, so they didn't take actually that much time to do. Especially the back view, because I already had figured out a lot of the information already. Just working out the structure, the details, refining the shapes as I go. And that's why I'm always looking back to my reference of 3/4 view. It's very important that I make sure everything works together. And I'm refining that window structure. Originally in the sketch I actually had a curve, but I actually made that more angular, similar to the original version. So I actually really enjoy doing vehicle rotations, mainly because they're a great exercise on perspective. I have to say I do enjoy doing perspective in general. So these are really good tests of my skill sets. If you want to understand perspective, doing a vehicle rotation like that is really a great exercise. You learn so much from it. When I was in animation, I actually did one of these just as an exercise when I was still in school, specifically to test my skill sets and to see where they were and to see if they were up to par to where I was heading. So you can see me refining the structure right now for this portion. To make it look more like it's actually facing forward, I actually added the base there on both sides, and that fixed actually the problem right there. So I'm using I'm using the pen tool a lot while I'm working on this for any curved portions, and I'm using the stroke option that appears when I right click. I have a tablet obviously to make things a bit easier, so there's a right click option on the tablet key to do that. So it's actually pretty quick to do this if you're using a tablet. Something like this I definitely wouldn't recommend using a mouse. Just starting to work on the engines here, and I did do quite a few tweaks before I was happy with the structure. Once again, this is a very important view because it tells you a lot of information about the structure of the vehicle, so it is important that I be as accurate as possible and figure out any problems in the structure that I had in the initial concept for it. So rather than having to redraw these engines every single time, especially since they're going to be in the same perspective, all I did is I worked on the single one, made sure that the structure was as accurate as possible for that one, and then just duplicated it for the remaining two, and that saved a lot of time. Now when I was initially working on this, I was actually doing ellipses using a more difficult manner. I since started using the shapes tool, which has actually significantly reduced the time required for me to draw ellipses, and has made them much more accurate as well. Fixing up the perspective on that because it would be actually facing the viewer and receding. Now this side view is almost completed. Really, once these engines are done, then I'm going to be starting on the front view. What I ended up actually doing is, although I was planning it out to begin with, I actually ended up drawing this and then mirroring the other half of it to make it more accurate and on model. Okay, so I've started working on the front view, and you can see that I have set both my basic structure for the side view along with the 3/4 view behind this so that I have it as a reference. And since I'm doing the front view, generally these portions are symmetrical, so I'm just going to work on the one side and then duplicate that onto the other side. So that actually saves quite a bit of time. There's no reason to draw it twice, especially for something that's so structurally inclined. It's just more accurate not to do that. A 3D modeler would actually be working on half of this at a time anyway, unless there was a very good reason not to. Refining the shape there for the engine. So even though I've duplicated that, I have to go in afterwards and just do some quick changes to make sure that you don't see the seam essentially for that, because you can often see a seam. Just working on the support edges there on the side and the attachments. Okay, so just start on the back view. I will be duplicating the engines that I had drawn from the front view simply because they are mirrored on both sides structurally, so there's no reason for me to redraw it from scratch. So I'm just working out the ellipse shape, as you can see. Just working on half at a time and then refining the shape, and I'm just duplicating once again the engine and using a mask so that I can mask out areas that would actually be hidden by those engines. So I'm just fixing the perspective now on that. It wasn't accurate, so I decided to fix it up to make it more true to my original images. So I just duplicated the engines, as you can see. Once again, I'm using a mask to hide areas that I don't require, and I'm just adding the ventilation systems from the base there. So this is the final schematic. As you can see, I just added some basic information to help fill up the empty space and make it more interesting. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you guys soon. So thank you and take care.